Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second session of the GEO Virtual Symposium on engaging UN agencies and intergovernmental organizations. My name is Sara Venturini, and I serve the GEO Secretariat as Climate Coordinator. I took up this role last year in September, following many years of international experience collaborating with UN bodies and advising governments and organizations on climate policies. I'm going to be your facilitator today. I'm not alone, though. I will be supported by a fantastic team behind the scenes, Rick and Wembo of the GEO Secretariat and Katie Fontaine, member of the GEO Program Board and one of the main organizers of this symposium. So let me briefly introduce the topic and the flow of this session. For those who are less familiar with GEO, GEO is an intergovernmental partnership that exists to help countries understand the value of Earth observation and enhance the use of Earth observation for research, policy, and action. At the very heart of GEO is a work program with over 60 joint activities that are generating Earth observation data, products, and knowledge across key sectors for the benefit of the society. So to focus on these activities, we have our engagement priorities which are in line with key international policy agreements. And these are the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the Paris Agreement on Climate Change, and the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. Also, we are currently working on the new Urban Agenda, which is emerging as a fourth engagement priority. But many other UN bodies and international organizations drive and support international policy and are custodian or lead agencies for topics that are addressed by the activities across the GEO work program. So understanding whom and how and when to engage these UN agencies and other international organizations is crucial to help the GEO community support UN member states and GEO members. This is not just relevant for policy development, but it cuts across many of the GEO's activities, from capacity development to resource mobilization and outreach. So today, the speakers will present concrete examples of collaboration. In particular, GEO work program leads will tell us about their successful initiatives and how the approaches used may be relevant to the other GEO activities in engaging with UN agencies. At the same time, representatives of UN bodies will outline what is needed from the GEO community to support an international policy mandate. So let's look at the agenda. We have 5 speakers for 1.5 hours. We will play a pre-recorded video and then have a live Q&A after each presentation. We start with Joanna Post from the Secretariat of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, then Tom Harvey of the GEO Flagship Global Forest Observations Initiative, GFY, followed by Sergey Cavada of the GEO Initiative Earth Observations for the Sustainable Development Goals, EO for SDG, Ria Katsanakis from the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, and finally Nicola Pirrone representing the GEO Flagship Global Observation System for Mercury, GOES for M. So before closing, I will try and summarize the main takeaways of the session. Participants will have the opportunity to interact with the speakers, of course, during the Q&A by going to Slido or slido.com and entering the event code GEO. Please make sure to select session 2, and then you will be able to submit your questions that will be moderated by the team, and I will pick up questions as efficiently as possible. If your question is not answered during the session, don't worry. The Slido channel will remain open for 48 hours after the session, and then I will moderate these incoming questions and pass them on to the presenters. So they will do their best to answer in writing within 1 week through Slido again or via email if appropriate. And also, if you are on Twitter, follow the GEO Secretariat, and if you wish to live during the session, please use the hashtag EO for Impact so others can follow the conversation. For any other issues regarding the session, please contact me at the GEO Secretariat. And without further ado, then let's get started with the presentation. The first speaker, as I said, is Joanna Post from the UNFCCC Secretariat, who is connecting from Bonn, Germany. Please let's play Joanna's presentation.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everybody. My name is Joanna Post, and today I will speak on how the GEO community can support the FCCC in the Paris Agreement. This is me. I'm a Program Management Officer at the UNFCCC Secretariat, leading all of the work on research and systematic observation, as well as focal point on ocean and climate change. Today, I'd like to speak, I'll give a quick overview of the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement, and then speak a little bit more about how GEO can support countries on mitigation and adaptation and support the global stocktake. Systematic observations are the foundation of the convention. They are mentioned in the commitments, and there's a specific article, Article 5, looking specifically at research and systematic observation, encouraging parties to promote and cooperate, support and strengthen, and improve capacity for systematic observation, particularly in developing countries. Earth observation plays a key role in addressing climate change and as a foundation to the work of the FCCC through a value chain, which includes observations, research, and IPCC assessments. The products of this value chain support the action by parties under the Convention, as well as the decision-making under the Convention. The data and information for action, including on adaptation, mitigation, and on reporting, can be better optimized through climate services. So we see GEO as a key partner in all of this support. The 2015 Paris Agreement is a legally binding international climate change treaty founded in 2015 with the ultimate goal to limit global warming to less than 2 degrees C, ideally 1.5 degrees C by the end of this century. Nationally determined contributions are a key part of this agreement, and parties in 2020 are due to provide their updated or renewed nationally determined contributions, which will officially kick off the Paris Agreement cycle, which is shown here. So these nationally determined contributions show the intention at national level. Then the action taken will be provided in reports. There will be a global stocktake at the international level every 5 years, starting in 23, which provides recommendations leading to increased ambition and revision of NDCs. So how can GEO support countries on their long-term progress on mitigation and adaptation? Well, it's hugely important to increase the capability of developing countries, particularly to implement mitigation and adaptation action. Some of the ways GEO is already working on this, but could and has the opportunity to continue that great engagement, is to refine tools and methods to increase the quality and decrease uncertainty on mitigation, particularly on enhancing parties' inventories, also on supporting the identification of emission hotspots and other opportunities for reducing emissions. On the adaptation side, there's opportunities to identify indicators to provide other climate services that can support not just adaptation assessment, but monitoring, also looking at long-term progress. And these indicators and other services can be incorporated into the adaptation reporting cycle under the FCCC. GEO, I know, is doing a lot of work on capacity and trying to build capacity, and this is hugely important to bring the data and the information in a useful way to those that need it, and to support countries' capabilities for action, to support technology capacity building and access to finance. And GEO is working in a lot of these ways, and that's super exciting. There's a huge range of multilateral agreements. This is quite and there's a lot of synergy there which needs to be improved. We work closely actually with colleagues across the UN, but those providing information to parties, to stakeholders that are using this information, have to also be aware of this. So that's actually a role I think that GEO has a huge capacity to play. Case studies are extremely important to make people aware of what's the opportunities, what's available, how can data and observation information and the services be used, and how can they be used to the sort of scientific support of action. That is really an opportunity, I think, that GEO can provide in as well. And then, of course, reporting back to the subsidiary body for scientific and technological advice under the FCCC, which is the body that deals with scientific information, is extremely important. And we have a modality to do this at every COP. There's now a Earth Information Day, which provides an opportunity for colleagues from the observation community to report back on actions, on opportunities, on data gaps under the convention. I want to talk a little bit about the global stocktake. Now, the first global stocktake is in 2023. This is actually before the first set of transparency reports come from the Paris Agreement. There's a lot of information that's coming in and a lot of discussions about how it's going to work, and it is a learning by doing exercise. But it has a very clear process. So there will be an information collection and preparation phase. There's a joint contact group being set up under the Substa SBI, and there's a range of sources for input being identified by parties, constituted bodies, UN organizations, IPCC, and so on. Now that will take place starting actually next year. Then the information collection will sort of overlap with a technical assessment phase, which really is a technical dialogue, which will be guided by two co-facilitators. They will take place at the SB sessions over 22-23. And then all of this will feed into the consideration of outputs at the COP in 2023. The SB chairs have been invited to provide guiding questions for every phase of the global stocktake, and this will guide the sort of considerations and discussions at those phases. The stocktake takes place, if you like, in terms of themes. So the way the information will be discussed and considered is in a thematic way, considering mitigation, adaptation, finance flows, efforts on response measures and loss and damage, and of course inputs on equity. And the systematic observation community has a huge role, and one of the things that we would like to discuss and work with GEO closely on is a suggestion for an ad hoc working group on systematic observation collective progress to support the global stocktake. We would suggest that the systematic observation community has a huge opportunity to really bring information to the global stocktake in a coordinated way, and encourage you to work together towards that, to think about putting together a working group to bring together or discuss what could be provided under the themes that we've already mentioned in terms of a structured work program, and that could then be converted into a synthesis report that could be an input into the global stocktake, a sort of consolidated contribution from the systematic observation community, if you like. So there will be obviously guiding questions, but we can already think a little bit thematically in terms of where are we, where do we want to go, and how we get there. So where are we? So this input into the global stocktake, if you like, would be, where are we already? So how are countries already using systematic observations? How is the systematic observation community providing support to countries? Where are the sources of information? Where's the go-to place that's really useful, and what already the case studies that could be identified? Then there's the where we want to go. What is the optimum? Where do we want to be by the next global stocktake, for example? Whether that be, a certain number of countries using observations for their GHG inventories, which are mostly from statistics agencies now, a certain number or supporting developing countries use EU information for their adaptation and so on, or a certain number of projects or a certain area of sectors. These are all things that are open but worth considering. We want full implementation also of the GCOS implementation plan. And then how do we get there? Data access is an issue. GEO initiatives are doing a lot of work through capacity building. These are some of the things that I think could be considered in terms of an input into the global stocktake. Really, the support at a party level, if you like, under the UNFCCC, the opportunity to support parties' actions. And then, as I've mentioned, there's an opportunity to support at a global level under the global Stocktake and support inputs into the actual convention itself. And I really look forward to working with the GEO community, including through the new climate change working group. And I look forward to engaging with you perhaps in person in the future. And I wish you very well and thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Joanna, for helping us identify the key entry points for GEO to contribute to implementing the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement. We have heard that this is possible at the individual level by supporting countries through the use of Earth observation, as well as the aggregate level by providing input to the global Stocktake process and input into the convention with capacity building support, improved access to technology and financial support as well. So I should add that the GEO work program already contains a number of promising initiatives that are contributing significant Earth observation data and products to the implementation of adaptation and mitigation plans, or have the potential to do so. For instance, GeoGLAM, Digital Earth Africa, GFOI, and many others. So we could well call these climate services, as you pointed out in your presentation. Perhaps this is the language that is not very familiar for many in the GEO community. But these existing initiatives also typically respond to the Paris Agreement's call for strengthened country-driven capacity building and technology transfer for climate action, especially in developing countries. Joanna also mentioned the GEO Climate Change Working Group, and this working group has been recently launched as a foundational element of the GEO Work Program, and it's aimed at engaging key experts in shaping the GEO strategy on climate change, improve coordination across the relevant GEO activities, and therefore better channel the products generated by the work program to support climate action. At the moment, we have 90 members, and we expect to focus on more actionable deliverables in the years to come. So I would like to get started with the Q&A part. I can see some questions on Slido popping up, but I'd like to first ask a question to Joanna directly. Joanna, can you speak?
Hi there, Sarah. Yes. Hello, everybody.
Okay, good. Good to see you. So my question will be regarding the contribution of GEO to the global Stocktake. How do you envisage Earth observation information to be provided for adaptation specifically, given that there is a lack of quantifiable targets or precise indicators for adaptation, as opposed to quantitative mitigation targets that are set out in NDCs?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. There's actually two sides to that question. The straightforward one is that in regards to adaptation, the Earth observation information can inform adaptation, and as an information base for governments for the preparation of adaptation plans, of course, and also possibly in measuring progress towards those plans. And then GEO as a network of national governments and projects, etc. Perhaps one example would be somehow setting targets of ensuring that adaptation plans of member countries have access or are using Earth observation information as far as possible, and to support that so that each participant's state's adaptation plans would be improved and national reports could reflect that. So that's on the one side. And then, of course, on the other side, there's the global Stocktake. So obviously parties' reports feed into the global Stocktake. But there's a, as I mentioned in my presentation, there's a more direct support that the Earth observation guide, which is this, nothing is set in stone. May I just emphasize that to start with? And then perhaps the opportunity that I mentioned was to bring the Earth observation community together to look at what is being currently done, what's possible, carefully consider information in national adaptation planning and global observations data that is available, Of course, there are currently no universally agreed indicators, and that may be a while, but there's no reason that the GEO cannot discuss what those options could be and make a significant contribution to that discussion amongst its member states, amongst its projects, and use some types of indicator to measure levels of vulnerability and adaptation. Perhaps not yet at a global scale, but certainly perhaps even at a national or a regional scale, so that there's some opportunities there to bring that together in a more global way, and that smaller groups of country could look at sort of regional opportunities for these indicators. But it's a work in progress. But I think GEO has a huge role in that moving forward.
Thank you, Joanna. That's very helpful. I have a question from a participant regarding citizen science. So where might you see citizen science and crowdsources data collection and analysis best contribute to national and international stocktake efforts?
So yes, that's an interesting one. It's the global stocktake is guided through certain modalities I mentioned. So there's inputs from a long list, but the IPCC has a recognized role in that. So I think there's certainly opportunities within the scientific community to recognize the role of citizen science in providing, in even if not necessarily published literature, but certainly grey literature that could be recognized by the IPCC and assessed within their reports. There's also obviously the role that science has to play on a national level and getting it recognized by supporting work that's going on that's reported through the national level. So there's different elements to that contribution, but it certainly has a huge role to play, and I think it has an increasing role to play considering how fast the technology is moving to support that engagement.
Indeed, and certainly GEO is a technology-oriented organization, and we support that. So there's another question that is more procedural. Do you see the new climate change working group creating a subgroup to address what you were suggesting for the global stocktake within GEO?
I think that's something that is a good possibility, and I hope to sort of have that conversation perhaps moving forward, but that obviously has to be a decision from GEO's side. So happy to support that, and I am already a part of that group. So
yeah, it's very preliminary. Yeah. I mean, the structure that we have discussed the first meeting, but of course we would like to, of course, receive your input and your guidance on the elements that you think are most valuable for the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement process. So feel free to tell us what you consider a good recommendation from the UNFCCC Secretariat side. Okay. In the interest of time, I would now move on to the following presentation, but if there are more questions coming up for you, Joanna, towards the end, I will come back to you, so please stay tuned. Okay?
Thanks very much, Sarah.
Thank you. Okay, so we should now move on to the next presentation by Tom Harvey from the GEO flagship GFOI. Tom is based at UNFAO, but is connecting from Australia, where it's already very late. So let's play Tom's presentation, please.
Hello everyone, my name is Tom Harvey and I'm here to talk about the Global Forest Observations Initiative and our approach to engaging with custodian REDD+ agencies. So that being UN agencies and other intergovernmental organisations and partners who are assisting developing countries to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from deforestation, forest degradation, and other related activities, which is commonly known as REDD+ under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So just briefly, I am the manager of the GFY office, which is hosted by the UNFAO. However, it is very important to note that the GFY office functions as a secretariat for all GFY partners, components and activities. As many of you may already be aware, GFY is the GEO flagship for forests. But in practical terms, GFY is essentially an international partnership for coordinating support in forest monitoring to developing countries to aid in the establishment of national forest monitoring systems and associated measurement, reporting and verification procedures for greenhouse gas emissions. So in short, we're in the business of supporting developing countries to monitor their own forests, to provide them with robust information to inform their own climate action and other national priorities. But it's also important to note that GFY is the product of the collaborative activities of our partners. So we here at the GFY office are not delivering support directly to developing countries ourselves, but instead we're working with our partners to help coordinate the enormous amount of work that they are already doing in this space. Engaging with UN agencies and intergovernmental organisations is therefore quite central to GFY's core business and structure. As I said earlier, GFY fosters the major international players in the forest monitoring support sector, which of course includes UN agencies and intergovernmental organisations, and brings them together with the other important players in this sector, such as donors, academia, space agencies, civil society organisations, the private sector, individual experts, and most importantly, the developing countries who are developing these forest monitoring systems. And so GFY provides an informal yet structured forum for this rich and diverse community to come together to collaboratively address the challenges that developing countries are facing in monitoring their forests and therefore enabling their participation in some of these more formal international conventions and processes that are facilitated under the UN and other sort of intergovernmental forums. And so to illustrate this, we can look at what constitutes GFY in this circle on the left here. And remembering that GFY is the product of the collaborative efforts of our partners, this includes obviously FAO and the assistance that they deliver to developing countries to improve their forest monitoring capabilities from both their headquarters in Rome and through their global network of office and expertise. It also includes the World Bank's Forest Carbon Partnership Facility in terms of the technical assistance and funding that they deliver to countries in all three of the major tropical forested regions of the world, that being the Asia Pacific, Africa, and of course Latin America. And then also the other intergovernmental organisations, including the Committee on Earth Observation Satellites, CEOS, the European Space Agency, ESA, and of course all of the other sort of national donors and programs which all play a vital role and bring unique skill sets to the table and ultimately strengthen the package of support that GFY partners are able to collectively provide to developing countries. So this circle here just represents GFY's lead partners, which are the major players in delivering international support, but there are many other contributors to GFY as well, such as the IPCC's Technical Support Unit and the UNFCCC Secretariat, who sit on GFY's advisory group to make sure that the guidance and support that GFY is providing is compliance with the IPCC's good practice guidance, and of course is relevant to the UNFCCC. The support that GFY partners provide is then, of course, delivered to our developing or REDD+ countries in a coordinated manner, which supports them to establish these centralised national forest monitoring systems and produce consistent information on their forests and how they change over time, and of course the resultant release and removal of greenhouse gas emissions from the atmosphere. These countries can then use this information to conduct consistent reporting for multiple different purposes as they wish. So that could include to the UNFCCC, be it nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement, or REDD+ under the Warsaw Framework, or just general national greenhouse gas inventories. It could be to the Green Climate Fund for performance-based payments for REDD+ activities, for example. The World Bank's various land use climate funds, such as performance-based payments for REDD+, under the FCPF, or sustainable landscape management under their initiative for sustainable forest landscapes, the ISFL. And there are, of course, also the SDG indicators for forests, reporting to the Global Forest Resources Assessment, FRA, which is facilitated by the UNFAO. And then, of course, providing robust information to inform national decision-making and action. So through this operational model, GFY is able to connect the broad community of forest monitoring practitioners, which includes, of course, UN agencies, the World Bank, and other specialist agencies, such as the space agencies under CEOS, to deliver, larger, more targeted, and ultimately a specialised package of support, which is then better able to help developing countries to not only take domestic action to protect their forests and reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but also engage in some of these international processes which are convened under the UN or otherwise on the right, that you can see on the right here. And this model allows for our partners to, work together on complex technical challenges in an informal and ultimately constructive environment under the GFY banner on the left here. And then once solutions are found, these can then be applied by the developing countries in the middle to support their participation in these more formal processes that we again see on the right here. So I will leave it at that for now, and I look forward to the discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom, for this presentation. It was very informative and clarified how GFY really coordinates the work of delivering international support on forest monitoring. We have heard that GFY is linked to the UNFCCC mandate, as it helps respond to parties' needs related to NDCs, REDD+, and national greenhouse gas inventories, but also it's working to help countries with a number of other lead agencies and, of course, to support national policy making. So I'd like to ask a question to break the ice. We know that as activities become more mature within the GEO work program, they are called flagships, which are operational and quite often have obtained a policy mandate to deliver Earth observation data and products to support policy development and implementation in certain specific areas. So as the GFY manager, what is the advice you would like to give to other GEO activity and initiative leads that aim to become flagships to really deliver Earth observation data and knowledge that is then taken up by decision makers to respond to an international policy framework?
Excellent. Thanks for the question, Sarah. And apologies, it has just gone midnight here in Australia, so I apologise if I sound a little rusty. I assure you, I'm certainly with you in body and in spirit. I think this is a really good question, and I think we all know that the interaction between technical and policy forums is always a challenging one. So there's probably not a perfect answer here. But I think that the one piece of simple advice that I would give to, other GEO community activities and initiative leads, and I realise that this is perhaps quite obvious and perhaps some advice that may be overdone, but I feel that maintaining a near continuous dialogue is absolutely key and should never really be underestimated, largely because it is relatively simple and largely effective. in the context of GFY, we seek to involve policymakers and the consideration of policy frameworks at every step in our process, really. So using the UNFCCC as an example, because it's one, I guess, that everyone is familiar with, we have the UNFCCC Secretariat, as well as parties to the convention and technical reviewers for the convention sitting on our advisory group, our GFY advisory group, helping to make sure that from the ground up, the, I guess, fundamental guidance which structures the broader assistance that GFY partners are providing is compliant with the expectations set out under the convention, under our policy framework, being the UNFCCC, which is obviously key to GFY's policy mandate. So then when we're working with countries, which is that middle box in that slide from my presentation, we seek to work with the national focal points to the UNFCCC to maintain that dialogue in country, to ensure that the support that we're providing is ultimately going towards helping that country to support their efforts to report their greenhouse gas emissions from forests under the convention in that box that I showed on the right there in my slide. So this shows how GFY is connected with the key policy framework at sort of all three of the core stages in our process. There's obviously all quite different, I guess, modalities for dialogue, but this suits all of the three different contexts that we saw there. But it still sort of really maintains that, I guess, practical dialogue, which helps to build kind of a common understanding between the two communities and helps to ensure, I guess, the relevance of the technical products that we're helping countries to produce. So again, I know it's obvious and I know it's maybe overdone, but dialogue between sort of the technical and policy community can never be underestimated. One point that our partners often make is the I guess, the practical value and productive working environment that GFY provides as a relatively informal forum that gives us sort of flexibility to address more complex technical challenges in the absence of any overly burdensome bureaucratic processes. We're able to quickly, I guess, adjust to target our work at the unique challenges that each individual issue may pose, and thus seek solutions via the most efficient and effective means possible. And then once a technical solution has been identified under GFY, these can then be taken back to the more, I guess, formal policy frameworks for uptake with confidence, knowing that the solution is I guess, backed by the international community of experts in our field.
Okay, that's very helpful. It's never too obvious, really. So thanks for that. So I had some questions on Slido. The most voted for now is, does the World Bank provide funding for capacity development for forest monitoring?
Yes, they do. So in that circle on the left-hand side, although I realise that might be coming up on the right-hand side of my screen, they're involved at kind of both ends. So the World Bank's is a lead partner of GFY through their Forest Carbon Partnership Facility, which includes direct assistance to countries who are parties to the FCPF and some of their other, I guess, landscape funds. And so they, I guess, are working directly with countries to deliver assistance to help those countries to then, I guess, conduct the reporting and the monitoring of forests, to conduct the reporting to meet the requirements for the performance-based funds that they provide. And of course, all of that is being coordinated through GFY in the same way that the UNFCCC reporting is, as per the example I gave in my last answer. Good question, though.
And another one that is quite technical, does GFY has any link with the GPFLR, Global Partnership on Forest Landscape Restoration, which is becoming central in the sharing of reforestation knowledge?
To be honest, no, we don't. But GFY is very much an open initiative. Our doors are always open to anybody who is, I guess, willing to collaborate and is, I guess, in the process of delivering significant support in forest monitoring to developing country partners. So yeah, we'd be very happy to look into that one further.
Okay. Right. I think. Yes, there's another really quick one. Mm-hmm. When you say change over time for national forest monitoring, what period of time are you talking about?
Well, it's largely up to the countries how they wish to conduct their reporting, but generally it is annual monitoring, which then feeds into the annual reporting, and the baseline, the historical estimates that countries wish to provide is also up to them. But generally, 10 years historical is a minimum. It again largely depends on the capacity of the country and the policy conditions of the country, looking to, I guess, monitor what has happened on their land over time. Previously, it was always a question of how much data is available in a time series consistent manner. That's not a problem that we see happening so much anymore, given the enormous amount of investment that has gone into data provisions and making time series data available. But to respond again to the question, it is generally looking at change between the years, but those sorts of decisions are largely up to the country and how they wish to conduct their reporting to the UNFCCC, for example.
Okay. Well, thank you again. I think that's all for the questions, but please stay because there may be more towards the end.
Sure.
Sorry it's so late for you, and thank you for your patience.
No problems. We Australians are used to late nights. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, next up is Sergey Cavada, connecting from the US at NASA, who is managing the GEO initiative Earth Observation for the Sustainable Development Goals, EO4SDG. And so please let's play Sergey's presentation now.
This is session 2, engaging UN agencies and intergovernmental organizations. Hello everybody, my name is Sergey Cavada, and today I will be talking to you about collaborating with UN agencies to deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals. A bit of information about me to begin with. So I serve as the lead for NASA's Earth Science Division's Sustainable Development Goals activities. And I am also the Executive Secretary for GEO's Earth Observations for Sustainable Development Goals initiative. EO4SDG is a growing international initiative launched by GEO to advance global knowledge about effective ways that Earth observations and geospatial information can support the SDGs. And as you can see, my background is in atmospheric science and climate dynamics, and I'm also very passionate about enabling Earth science applications to address development challenges around the world. So with less than a decade left to attain the SDGs, I wanted to begin by highlighting the importance of more thoroughly understanding the enabling environment that is essential for Earth observations to be fully integrated within country processes and the institutional settings that drive the implementation of the SDGs. And so shown here are some of these key aspects that still require attention as the GEO community is working to bridge the gap across disciplines and promote the integration of EO solutions for implementing the SDGs at global to local levels. And so you can see that these include institutional and financial challenges, for instance, looking at horizontal and vertical coordination between government agencies, policy and regulatory elements, including standards for data collection, as well as disaggregation of indicators, and science, technology, and policy interface challenges. So it is important to keep this in mind as GEO engages with UN agencies and conventions to fill gaps in value demonstration and also develop practical guidance on how Earth observations, in addition to statistics and other data sources, can and are already being used to inform decisions related to the SDGs. And so in the next couple of slides, I will show some examples of existing collaboration with UN entities to advance EO for SDGs. And I will highlight some key enabling factors and challenges as well. And so GEO collaborates with UN Habitat on sustainable urban development issues, including on Goal 11 on making cities and human settlements more inclusive, resilient, and sustainable, and the new urban agenda. The combination of UN Habitat's mandate as the custodian agency for specific SDG 11 targets and indicators, in addition to existing and in some cases long-term collaborations with geothematic initiatives and participating organizations in the areas of sustainable urbanization, have served as key enablers for this collaboration. UN Habitat has also been serving a leading role in country engagements through regional or country workshops and in some cases through direct technical support to countries. In addition, some recognized challenges, however, have included both limitations in terms of financial and technical resources around addressing major requests from countries for partner support, including applications of Earth observation data for specific SDG areas, and the need for better coordination between UN Habitat and the Earth observation experts and providers that are working in this field. And so to address some of these challenges, GEO has established a program board subgroup on urban resilience to help identify areas and opportunities for collaboration with relevant parties, internal and external to GEO. In addition, UN Habitat and GEO are now leading an effort to build an Earth observations toolkit for sustainable cities and communities to facilitate knowledge sharing and connect national, subnational, and city experiences in uses of Earth observation data for sustainable urbanization. And so some of these efforts are really important to help both raise awareness but also build confidence to the data. The next example that I wanted to share briefly is an ongoing collaboration with UN Environment in different SDG areas, including freshwater-related ecosystems, as well as coastal eutrophication and plastic debris. So one key enabling factor for this engagement includes collaboration and multi-stakeholder partnerships, including with public and non-public sector, that has enabled the development of web portals, tools, and platforms like the Freshwater Ecosystems Explorer or the one on chlorophyll A and coastal eutrophication that provide easy data access, essential visualizations, basic statistical evaluations, and help countries understand what can and cannot be delivered through the use of the data. A few of the challenges around this engagement include the need for more enhanced support for country-level SDG monitoring and enhanced capacity development. In addition, there are some challenges around a more clear pathway for integrating country use cases and good practice examples in some of these global platforms and dissemination efforts. And so that, in addition to opportunities for showcasing what Earth observation data can do beyond the SDG indicators to help address some of the interdependencies that exist between different SDG targets and thematic areas, including, for instance, precursor signals or feedback loops. is also an area that requires additional work. And so in the next slide, I wanted to also provide an example from a project level perspective around a collaboration between a project that is led by Andrew Hansen at Montana State University with 3 countries, Ecuador, Colombia, and Peru, and in collaboration with the UN Development Program to apply Earth observation data to help identify highest quality forest and forecast climate change impacts in those countries. And so UNDP has been playing a supportive role in terms of helping raise awareness and build capacity, but also help enable interactions amongst the 3 countries. Notably, UNDP has hired a country coordinator to work directly with all 3 countries. And so this has been very helpful for this specific project activity. So to conclude, and based on some of these examples that I have shared here, there are already several ongoing activities, and there exist more opportunities for GEO to engage with UN agencies to help more fully integrate Earth observation data to deliver on the SDGs. And so such efforts include opportunities at both the tactical as well as the strategy and policy level, and entail items such as helping develop and share successful EO use cases for the SDGs, joining activities to build capacity and support country-driven Earth observation validation and suitability assessment efforts, but also really working together to put Earth observation data into action to not only inform monitoring and reporting efforts, but also develop policies that are mindful of the interdependencies that exist across systems and between systems and different system components. And so that is something that GEO, in working with the UN jointly, can help also enable a better understanding of the interconnections between not just the how Earth observations can help achieve the SDGs, but also with linkages to the Sendai framework and the Paris Climate Agreement. And so with that, I want to thank you very much, and also invite you, if you're on Twitter, to follow us at EO for SDG, our initiative's Twitter account. Thank you.
Thank you, RG. It's great to see that there are already a number of existing collaborations of the GEO community with UN agencies and national projects in support of SDGs that are working well. These are obviously showing both successes and challenges that are involved in such experiences. So I think you also outlined with great clarity the opportunities associated with such engagement. And in particular, I would like to underline what you said about the importance of the use of Earth observations to develop policies that take into account the overlaps and the synergies that exist between the SDGs, the disaster risk reduction and climate change, which is an area of critical work, of course. So I have a personal question to start off our Q&A. Arji, what is the main lesson learned in your experience managing a GEO initiative like EO for SDG and connecting with UN agencies to deliver meaningful EO data and products? What are the steps, the next steps that you envisage to become a flagship?
Thank you very much, Sarah, and hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. So on your first question, Sarah, I think a couple of items that we've identified through this through the EO for SDG initiative and the work on enabling Earth observation data to be applied for the SDGs has been that it's really important to begin with to work with countries. The UN listens really to what countries say, and so this is really key to try and understand at that level what are the needs, where there are gaps, and how we can work together to support that. In addition, what we've seen through the time is that it has been, especially at the beginning, particularly time-consuming and a bit difficult to get the trust and the confidence from the UN, especially from the UN Statistical Commission, about the Earth observation data and products. And so it takes time to get that trust and then to begin working together to support both aspects in terms of policy development, but then also concrete examples in applying the data for specific SDG targets and indicators. And the last thing I will mention is that every agency, so for the SDGs, there are different UN agencies that are responsible to help develop global methods, to work with countries, to get information based on monitoring and data collection activities, and also help build capacity. And so each one of those agencies has their systems and processes. So organizations like the FAO work differently than UN Habitat or UNCCD or UN Environment. And so it is important to try and understand that and develop a tailored approach in working with these different agencies. And for instance, in some cases, we have seen that a UN entity may take a more top-down approach versus others that are really working from the bottom up and really working at the country, in some cases the subnational level, like in the case of UN Habitat. So one of the items that, I'd like to discuss further with colleagues here and potentially, we look to do as part of our EU4SDG work is to really help share some of these experiences on also the processes and the systems that exist in these different UN entities that have a mandate or responsibility for the SDGs. And so to the second part of your question, or in terms of the GEO flagship, I do want to point out that one of the primary goals of our initiative is to really work with flagships and with other thematic initiatives and community activities within GEO to really help bring the SDGs into their activities. And so this can be done by helping them work with respective UN entities or leverage the work that they already have in the ongoing collaboration to bring data and analysis in support of targets and indicators, but to also help countries speed up progress toward meeting the SDGs by working with them to ensure the full integration of the data to inform national policies and investments. And so certainly, I think, in terms of becoming a flagship, there is a lot around institutional settings and engage in the community, and EU4SDG has done a lot in that aspect. We definitely, have a relatively small budget, and so if we, aspire to become a flagship, we would want and we would invite, and we do invite people to contribute more of their time and resources and get involved. But as mentioned already, a lot of the purpose and the goals of EU4SDG are also in working with geothematic initiatives and flagships to really enable the linking of their work and activities to support SDGs.
Thank you, Archie. That's very clear. And I liked your point about working with countries to get trust, which is fundamental. I have some questions here on Slido. In your experience of the last number of years, do you think that progress has been made with national statistical offices using Earth observations?
Yes, that's a fantastic question. And I will say that absolutely progress has been made. I mean, we're still, there's still a lot to be done and hurdles and challenges to be overcome. But it is certain that we have seen more and more through the emerging of country examples and use cases that national statistics offices and ministries or relevant agencies are starting to both, trust more of the data, but also be interested in developing capacities to use the data in conjunction with other types of information to for both monitoring, but also to drive progress on the SDGs. And so I do want to point out that we have some country use cases that we have already shared through the EU4SDG website. So these are available, and happy to include a link on the chat window here for people to visit, and we are working to capture more of that. In addition, we have launched recently for the second time a GEO SDG Awards program. And so this also aims to recognize and help share endeavors and activities that apply Earth observation data to drive progress and help monitor this progress on specific targets and indicators. So that is another way in which we've already captured some very inspiring country examples, and we're looking forward to doing so again this year.
That's great. I think I'll take one last question. From a work program perspective, how do you see the Geo Knowledge Hub helping with some of the actions you have outlined?
Certainly. So one of the activities that we are doing, as mentioned briefly in my presentation, is in collaboration with UN Habitat, the Human Planet Initiative and the Global Urban Observations Initiative and many other partners, and through consultation with countries and cities to develop this toolkit on Earth observations for sustainable cities and communities. And so we are in direct contact with the Geo Knowledge Hub team to understand how information on both the data and the tools, but also specific use cases in addition to publications and practical guidance can be made available through the Knowledge Hub to help really share more broadly that information and enable the scaling of the use of existing tools and methods by more countries and cities around the world. So that's definitely one example of doing that.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Arji. I think your example will lead the way for other initiatives in the GEO Work Program.
Thank you.
Okay. I think in the interest of time, I'll move on to the next presentation. Is Ria Katsanakis from the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. Ria is based in Geneva, in Switzerland. And so let's play Ria's presentation now, please.
I will speak today to you about how the GEO community can support the implementation of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, which I know is one of your engagement priorities as GEO community. So I am based in the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction and specifically in the Global Risk Analysis and Reporting Unit. And I'm currently coordinating the development of the UN Global Assessment Report on Disaster Risk Reduction 2022, which is the flagship report of UNDRR. So we will talk today about 3 global initiatives in which we believe that the GEO community could have input and that could get engaged in fostering the implementation of the Sendai Framework. The first one is the UN Global Assessment Report on Disaster Risk Reduction, as mentioned, our flagship report, which will come out in its next main report iteration in 2022, while we have a special report dedicated to drought risk that will come out in 2021. So we have already engaged with some of the GEO community through the working group on disasters, but we're hoping to have more traction actually with the wider GEO community. So if you're interested, it would be very good if you could also get in touch and get on board. So the UN Global Assessment Report on Disaster Risk Reduction will have 2 specific issues in which we see that Earth observation could be complementary, helping the analysis. The first one is that we will look at what is progress made or setbacks towards reaching the SDGs, the Sendai Framework targets, as well as the Paris Agreement, as the report will come out just before the stocktake of these global agendas. And what we also want to look at is synergies and trade-offs that governments are facing when implementing them simultaneously. And we believe that Earth observation can show trends that will give some indication on these type of trade-offs or synergies where actually there is a setback in certain goals or targets because another one has been pushed very strongly by governments. Another part of the global assessment report where we hope that Earth observation will strongly contribute is the risk trends part, where we will visualize risk, especially vulnerability and exposure, and we hope to go beyond structural and productive land use information only, but also show, for instance, air pollution. We would also like to know if Earth observation could support the understanding of future risk, and if we could show the resilience of basic services, critical infrastructure, livelihoods, and community lifelines. This is related again to one of the targets of the Sendai framework, which looks at the reduction of losses, but also the reduction of risk towards basic services, critical infrastructure, etc. And that would be very complementary if EO could feed into that. The next initiative I will quickly introduce is the Global Risk Assessment Framework, or GRAPH, which has been designed to inform decision makers basically what is the landscape that they're looking at in terms of risk at local, sub-regional, or national level. And we can see this impact cube on the left-hand side. So we have all the different levels: global, national, subnational, local. We then have hazards, exposure, and vulnerability. So that's the risk components. And then we have the human, ecological, economic, infrastructure, and political assets that are at risk. So here we really want to show the full landscape of risk and enable decision makers to make informed decisions with the aim of creating risk-resilient, sustainable development pathways. So the GRAPH is a framework, a network, and a resource where decision makers can find information and make risk-smart decisions. Earth observation, we believe, can contribute to visualize and analyze vulnerability and exposure and develop systemic risk scenarios at country level in a couple of pilot studies that we will set off in certain countries. Some have been chosen, like Costa Rica. Some others were still in discussion because of the pandemic. We got a bit delayed, and of course we can't do in person right now, but that would be another entry point for collaboration. And finally, I would like to quickly talk about the Sendai Framework Monitor. I think many of you are probably already aware of it. So the Sendai Framework Monitor is used directly by member states to monitor progress made towards reaching the 7 targets of the Sendai Framework. And here, government officials can grant access to other organizations other than the disaster management agencies, which are the main focal point monitoring the progress, to actually also input data through the indicator system. So Earth observation could play a very important role in supporting the monitoring of the targets by A, complementing disaster loss data and official statistics, and B, by showing trends regarding the qualitative targets. So that is, for example, the coverage of early warning systems, international cooperation, and the implementation of DRR strategies. So it would be interesting to see if there's any trends visible through Earth observation that would showcase these kind of progress or actions taken by governments and how this can be visualized through Earth observation. So last but not least, I know I've only outlined the global initiatives here. We, of course, are also supporting the development of national and local DRR strategies through our regional offices, which we have in 5 regions. And this is also where Earth observation could play an important part in developing the basic risk assessment that underlies the development of the strategies. So if you're interested in any of these initiatives, then please do get in touch with me. You can see my contact details on the last slide, and I'm standing ready for questions, and I'm very happy to interact with you.
Thank you so much, Ria, for highlighting opportunities for the whole GEO community to contribute with Earth observation, data, and knowledge to these 3 important processes under the UN DRR. like the GAR, the GRAPH, and the Sendai Framework Monitor. Ria also mentioned that UNDRR has already engaged with the DRR working group within GEO, which was recently launched under the Engagement Priorities Coordination Foundational Task. It's an ongoing element of the GEO work program together with the Climate Change Working Group and other working groups. And this is meant to help better coordinate the efforts of the GEO community in this area. So Ria, I have a warm-up question for you. Like Joanna and RJ before, you have mentioned synergies and trade-offs that exist between the Sendai framework, the UN 2030 Agenda, and the Paris Agreement. Could you tell us more about your work with SDGs and climate?
Yes. So just to clarify, for people who don't know the UN system very well, the UNDRR is a secretariat. So we're not an implementing agency, which means that we don't have country offices in all the countries like the UN Development Program, for example. But what we provide is guidance that we develop and tools together with partners. So currently, for example, we are finalizing a guide for country teams that work with governments directly on how to integrate disaster risk reduction into climate change national action plans. And we're also finalizing a guide on how to integrate DRR and climate change adaptation into the sustainable development collaboration frameworks that are also led by the UN country teams. Often that is UNDP. So this is some of the direct work that we do with other UN agencies on supporting the SDGs and the climate change agreement. And the reason is because we really believe that we have to reach all three agendas by 2030. Otherwise, there's no long-term resilience and no sustainable development possible. So that's why we also want to focus on the synergies and trade-offs and actually outline what happens in sustainable development, for example, if we don't have risk-informed sustainable development, which is a big issue, because then when there's one single disaster, it can basically wipe out the gains of many years. But that's just to start, and I'm looking forward to any questions.
Thank you, Ria. It's a great point, and I'm sure many in the GEO community are already looking at this angle to make the three agendas converge by 2030. So it's great that you have this suggestion for us. In fact, there is another question about the consideration of interdependencies. How should GEO actually organize its work, through working groups, with an ad hoc transversal group, with a specific agenda for joint working group actions? I know it's it's for internal coordination, but perhaps you may have some suggestions based on your experience.
Yes, so we know there's always a problem when people work in silos, and we do so at the UN, and we do so at country level, and government ministries are also usually set up in silos, and so is international funding. So we always have the same picture at all levels. So what we really need to try to do, I guess it's difficult to have a transversal group in addition to all the working groups, but maybe have some observers sometimes visit each other or visit the other working groups so that they actually know what is happening, and try to have some win-win scenarios that everybody's pushing for. So this is what we're trying to bring out in the Global Assessment Report in 2022 that I mentioned in my presentation, which then would look at scenarios that governments could support that would actually simultaneously implement and support the three agendas rather than only one and then having setbacks in the other. So we have to understand these dynamics and synergies and trade-offs between the different frameworks to actually make the right decisions. And then I would say that the working groups could prioritize those type of activities.
That's great. Thanks, Ria. Another quick one. What about the new urban agenda? Are you working on that front as well?
Yes, so we also consider that in the broader realm of the Agenda 2030, we don't have a direct collaboration with Habitat on national level plans, but we do have a Cities Resilient campaign that we run collaboratively with UN Habitat that sits in our Getty office in Incheon, Korea, and that has a long-standing collaboration on the new urban agenda.
Excellent. Okay, I have to finish this part here, but please stay with us again because at the end we may have more questions coming up for you. Okay, thanks for now. And now the floor goes to Nicola Pirrone from CNR in Italy, who's leading the GEO flagship Goes for M. So please let's play Nicola's presentation now. I hope the presentation from Nicola is coming soon. Rick? Oh.
Actually, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for inviting me to present the progress on Mercury flagship under GEO. Let me introduce. I've been director of a large research institute of CNR in Italy for about 10 years.
It looks like we have some technical problem, but I'm sure the team is going to resume immediately.
Okay, good morning. Actually, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for inviting me to present the progress on Mercury flagship under GEO. So let me introduce myself very quickly. I've been director of a large research institute of CNR in Italy for about 10 years, and then I visited Harvard as visiting scholar. Then since the last 30 years, I've been wearing a double hat, both as a scientist and as an expert and designated delegate from my country and from a European Commission in different negotiation of environmental policy. And then I'm engaged with the GEO for about 12 years, since 2008, leading several tasks, and now I'm leading this flagship on Mercury that is supporting the Minamata Convention. So the relationship between science and policy is a long history for Mercury and for the Minamata. Everything started back in 2001 with the first global Mercury assessment report. And then in the last 20 years, we had a lot of activity in terms of negotiation, preparation of the report. Here you can see this slide. These are two slides that all interested can have it. So you can see the sequence over time of different negotiation phase in different ad hoc group. And then in the last few years, since the Minamata Convention entered into the force, we had 3 conference of party meetings. The last one was just last November in 2019. Here is an example just to show you what has been the good relationship between scientific community and the policy making process. A lot of scientists, leading scientists worldwide, have been supporting countries and the UNEP in the preparation of different technical report recommendations and to shape this Minamata Convention that is a legally binding instrument. So this relationship really is continuing and is a really successful story. Then came the activity under GEO, and the GEO is a nice framework for linking science and the policy making process. One of the activity that we are carrying out in the Minamata Convention implementation strategy is to provide answers to a number of key policy questions. Here you can see the four main policy questions that you can deal with after the ratification of the convention, and when we have a conference of parties, of course, one of the goals is to shape the strategy for the implementation of this convention. So the first thing parties will ask to scientific community and to countries if the implemented strategy have been having an effect in terms of achieving the target of the convention. And also for the mercury, of course, one of the indicator is how much mercury is bioaccumulated in the food chain, and specifically in marine and freshwater biota, and finally to the population. And so in the framework of this flagship, we have been developing a knowledge hub that brings policymakers to have access to a number of data sets that are global monitoring data sets for mercury, but socioeconomic data. So we have data, and then of course in this flagship we have been developing tools, downstream and upstream analytic tools and models to extract knowledge from this data, from observation, Earth observation information, to provide knowledge to those that will take decision on what should be done by countries in order to meet the target of the convention. So at the end, in the last few years, was nominated an ad hoc group to evaluate the effectiveness of this convention based on evidence, scientific evidence, if the measure have been having effect in terms of reduction of exposure of people to mercury contamination. So we have been developing a virtual lab, a knowledge hub in this flagship to allow policymakers to co-design a policy scenario and also to do some economical evaluation of different strategies in order to provide a concrete basis for those that will take decision to decide what is the best strategy to implement. Lately, we have been also working to engage more the GEO Secretariat in the Conference of Party process. And in the last COP in November 19, GEO was observer of the Conference of Party of the Minamata, and also there was a speech, a communication by Theodora Mills, from a communication officer from the GEO Secretariat, with a nice statement providing, highlighting the potential for GEO to support the policy process for the Minamata. So today, the scope of this flagship is to really federate existing monitoring network, to federate the different efforts worldwide to develop advanced sensor to fill geographical gaps for monitoring, and also to validate existing tools, models to assess a policy scenario. As of today, we have several countries that have been signing officially the partnership agreement of the flagship. So we plan to have a big meeting of the flagship. Was already planned for September this year, but unfortunately due to COVID-19 issue, we have been postponing to the meeting to a date that have not been decided yet. But very likely we will propose to have a virtual meeting by the end of the year in order to keep the ball rolling. Thank you for your attention. I'm available for any questions from the audience.
Thank you, Nicola, for illustrating very well how the GOES4M partners have contributed to shape the UN Minamata Convention on Mercury, first over 20 years of preparatory negotiations and now supporting the full implementation of the convention with concrete monitoring activities within GEO. So as you rightly pointed out, GEO is a framework for linking science and policy making, and it's important for GEO work program activities to aim to provide answers to key policy questions and provide knowledge to decision makers to meet international commitments. So a warm-up question for you to get started. You have been involved in this process for a long time now and have contributed to build GOES4M from the efforts of the scientific community already ongoing. What is the key lesson learned that you can share with others in the GEO community from your experience leading a flagship that is truly responding to policy questions and has developed strong links with the UN Convention?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon to everyone. Yeah, the lesson learned is that in order to interact, as we know, scientists are not very familiar with the policymaking process. And the common vision is that is a loss of time when you have to spend time to interact with the policymakers. But slowly this is getting better on this side, and my suggestion is that in the interaction with the policymakers helps a lot to do a better research, scientific research. As I said, I've been a scientist and expert for the policymaker, for different stakeholders and government, and I have been learning a lot how to do a better science. And I got a lot of inspiration from interaction with the policymakers in starting and new project, research project to make a contribution to progress the science behind the policy. So my suggestion is to all scientists is to spend time for the policy making is not a waste of time, is an investment for yourself as a scientist and also as a citizen.
Great. And so I have a follow-up question on this in terms of engaging with policymakers. Does working with the Minamata Secretariat in Geneva make a difference to the outreach or impact of efforts for GOES4M? The fact that it's easy to access the Secretariat in Geneva?
Well, doesn't make a difference if it's in Geneva or in Jakarta. There are very good people in the Secretariat of the Minamata in Geneva, very proactive, very collaborative. So we had a very nice and experience with them. We have been building several project initiatives in the framework of GEF funding activity to support the Minamata. So is a very successful story, still going and still interacting on a daily basis as needed. And indeed now we are discussing how to proceed with this effectiveness evaluation, what needs to be done, validated models and tools that should be considered in order to support UNEP countries and the local government in this big effort, because, as we know, the implementation of a convention, it's not an easy task from government. So they need support, they need validated methods and approach that all data should be comparable, globally speaking.
I have now a more substantial question. One that is also interesting for me as a climate person. So the question is, the biggest mercury reservoir is in the permafrost. What about modeling impact of climate change on mercury emissions? Have you thought about these interdependencies?
Yeah, we are working on this. One of besides flagship, I'm coordinating a huge European effort supporting GEO, that is the Era Planet program, which is a big investment of over 30 million. And this program has been funding 4 projects. One of these is on the Arctic region, to understand the cycling of different contaminants, including mercury, due to climate change effect. And the permafrost, is a big reservoir of many things, including mercury, and mercury is a semi-volatile contaminant. So it can be, you have a partitioning between atmosphere and seawater. So that's very interesting, and this may lead to a substantial change of the cycling of mercury over on global scale. So we've been doing already quite a lot modeling exercise on this, but more work needs to be done in terms of observation and modeling.
Indeed. There was another question that you actually just answered about the ERA planet. How does it link to your work with GOES4M and the Minamata Convention? But I think you covered it, unless you wanted to.
We have a dedicated project in ERA planet that is the IGOSP, that is dedicated to develop operational system for the Minamata and for the Stockholm Convention. So we have both mercury and persistent organic pollutant in this project, and a number of partners already engaged with UNEP, with different secretariats, Minamata and the Stockholm Convention, are working to prepare systems, so knowledge hub, virtual laboratories that allows policymakers to play with the different policy scenario and also to do some economical assessment of this scenario.
Fantastic. Okay, so we are looking forward to see the next steps of this flagship, and we'll follow closely. So I would like now to give a short summary of the discussion. We are slightly running over time, but it's nothing to worry about. So let me try to summarize what has been said. First of all, we all agree that it's critical for the GEO work program activities to engage with UN agencies and conventions, because Earth observation data and products that are generated by such activities cannot be developed in isolation. So to be meaningful and effective, they need to respond to a policy question and be delivered in a usable format to decision makers. One element that was mentioned by all presenters was coordination among partners, both internal and external to GEO, including donors and the private sector, that are often most important for the implementation of action. Another common element across the presentation was capacity development, mentioned both as a challenge and a success factor. We have heard that it is crucial to develop the capabilities of countries, especially developing countries, and lower the barriers for entry to technology and build trust. It was also very useful to see a clear breakdown of all the set of challenges that GEO initiatives may have to face, like institutional, financial challenges, policy challenges, challenges related to science and policy interface. And all of these require special attention from the GEO community. And finally, because of the wide-ranging scope of Earth observation data, one huge opportunity is the use of Earth observation to develop and monitor policies that are really capturing the synergies and the trade-offs that exist between the major international agreements. And that should improve consideration of such interdependencies, perhaps through the newly established working groups. We don't know. the GEO community will have to think about it really hard. And with that, I hope I have summarized the main points, the main takeaways. There are still a few questions on Slido. However, I would suggest, because the Slido channel will remain open for 48 hours after this session, so we can still collect the questions, and we can answer those within the next week. And so I would suggest to leave these questions for later. I will collect the questions and essentially pass them on to the speakers, who can respond on Slido or in writing in an email as appropriate. So again, the live sessions are recorded and will be available on the GEO's website, together with the transcript of all the questions and answers. So you can't miss anything. And finally, I would like to thank our speakers, especially those who had to wake up really early or stay up late to be with us today. Thanks to all participants for your interest in this session and your stimulating questions. And you are invited to join the next sessions of the GEO Symposium throughout the week. So all the best from me on behalf of the GEO Secretariat. And thanks again. Until next time.
Thank you.